Good evening, everybody. My name is Ware Harmon, and I'm the Executive Director of Town Hall Seattle. On behalf of our organization, it's a pleasure to welcome you to tonight's live stream conversation with Sebastian Parker and Kenan Block. As we get underway, I want to acknowledge that our institution stands on the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the Duwamish. We thank them for our continuing use of the natural resources of their ancestral homeland. And we thank you all for tuning in. Town Hall is sincerely grateful for the opportunity to invite Seattle audiences and beyond, as you probably noticed in the chat field there, into present tense exchanges of issues, ideas, and creativity, even when we don't get to do it in person. Town Hall will continue to produce online content throughout this fall and into the new year, and as circumstances allow, to even host live streams from our building. Tonight, in fact, would have been one of those live streams from our building were it not for the good word that was brought down from the state just yesterday. So we appreciate both of our speakers tonight for their flexibility as we reschedule this to a virtual format. Town Hall's adding new events and podcasts every day. I'd be a fool not to tell you a little bit about them. Upcoming programs include an exploration of the brain with neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett, a look at how data visualization can sometimes be misleading with data analyst Alberto Cairo, a look at the characteristics of strongman leaders with Ruth Ben-Ghiat. I have a suspicion we'll be discussing strongman leaders before this night's through, so you can follow up, create your own curriculum with Ruth's appearance in early December, as well as upcoming appearances by Mario Livio, Michael Eric Dyson, and conversation with Robin DiAngelo, Andre Gregory, John Luther Adams, and plenty more music coming from our Great Hall. For more information about all of the above, visit townhallseattle.org. Our work is made possible through your support and the support of our sponsors. Civics programs in particular are courtesy of the Real Networks Foundation, the True Brown Foundation, KUOW, and the Wincote Foundation Northwest. But Town Hall is at heart a member-supported organization, and I want to thank all of our members watching tonight. We wouldn't be here without your support. So we feel very fortunate to have the chance to host tonight's featured speaker at this particular moment. Over recent years, Sebastian Parker has regularly appeared, at least yearly, sometimes more often, to offer unvarnished insights into contemporary politics and racism in American society. Frankly, and I was looking at the numbers today, alongside Robert Reich, we would call Christopher Parker a Town Hall MVP over this last, 8-9 years that he's been part of the community here. It's great to have, I should say the Town Hall community, that is. It's great to have the chance to hear from him in this tense time where once again, the limits of American democratic practice are being tested by this current administration. He's in conversation tonight with another longtime Town Hall friend and conciliary, former board member, Kenan Block. I'm grateful for the chance to have them both and here for a proper introduction of Professor Parker and to frame up tonight's presentation. Please welcome Kenan Block.
Ware, thank you very much, and thank you to the whole Town Hall team. I particularly appreciate that with all of the sort of horrible COVID news and new staggering numbers, that we want to break from that. So what better than to spend an evening looking at the chaos of American politics right now. So thank you all for being here from far and wide. Professor Sebastian Parker is a nationally acclaimed political scientist. His expertise about right-wing movements and African-American political and social thought are widely recognized. Chris has been a tenured professor at the University of Washington for over a decade, and his keen insights have been frequently quoted in national media, including the New York Times, Washington Post, and many others. And it's worth noting Chris was one of the very, very few scholars who accurately predicted Donald Trump's election back in 2016. Chris's first book, Fighting for Democracy, Black Veterans and the Struggle Against White Supremacy in the Post-War South, from Princeton Press, is a fascinating dive into the experience of Black veterans. Chris's decade of service in the United States Navy gives him keen personal insights in this arena. Chris's more recent book with Matt Barretto, Change They Can't Believe In, The Tea Party and Reactionary Politics in America, is an absolute must-read. It's a deeply researched and data-driven book in which Chris cracks the code behind Trump voters, and just want to say that Chris is such a gifted writer. He takes complex topics and a lot of information and puts it in a really fun, interesting, insightful, and accessible form. So pick up this book if you haven't read it. And now Chris is writing his next book, the Great White Hope, Donald Trump race, and the crisis of American democracy, which he'll discuss a little more as we get into the talk tonight. Chris grew up in South Los Angeles. After the Navy, he earned his PhD from the University of Chicago. I've gotten to know Chris, and I've had the pleasure of taking several of his classes. And in a lovely city that is, I think, rightly criticized too often for suffering from Seattle nice, Chris is a true breath of fresh air. He doesn't mince his words, and he's never shy for telling it exactly as he sees it, which you're about to experience. And a little bit about myself, I'm actually a fifth generation Seattleite. I had a long career in broadcast journalism. I worked in Washington, D.C., covering Congress and national affairs for the PBS NewsHour, and then for MSNBC, where I was Brian Williams' lead Washington producer. Since then, I've been back home in beautiful Seattle running a media and communications firm. So let's get to it, Chris. Well, don't have to worry about things ever being boring. Just hours ago tonight, we learned that Trump had fired Christopher Krebs, who is the top official responsible for securing the presidential election. And Krebs was guilty for actually speaking the truth publicly, calling the 2020 election the most secure election in history. And, there's a terrible overused word that I disdain, but I'm using it anyway tonight, unprecedented. Here we have a president who has clearly lost the election, refusing to concede, and just as bizarre is that all of his top Republican lieutenants in Congress seem to be backing him up. Chris, what the hell's going on?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, the town hall, for hosting us. Kenan has become a very good friend of mine after he's taken a couple classes with me, and it's good to have folks of his generation in class because they've actually lived the history about which I speak. All right, so I am probably going to drop a few policy loud swear words tonight. So if you have sensitive little Seattle ears for that, you probably need to get the fuck off this screen right now because I will go there. So what's going on right now is that the Republican Party, they're trying to placate this fucking child, right? They're trying to placate this guy. And the reason why they're trying to placate Trump is because he's probably going to continue to pull the strings of the Republican Party for years to come, right? Or until he chokes on a hamburger, one of those two. And it's because he has this robust following. At last count, I believe it's on the order of 72, 73 million people voted for him. And lots of these people are really hardcore and diehard. They will follow him to the ends of the earth. And he can continue to manipulate the Republican Party because of that base. And they also, moreover, need him to come out and campaign, for the runoff elections or for the Senate in Georgia in January. When you have, I think, Perdue is running for one seat, and Kelly Loeffler is running for another one, and they're opposed by this young guy. Perdue is opposed by Ossoff, and Warnock is opposing Loeffler.
So, continuing in that vein, Chris, this election's only 2 weeks old. Hard to believe. It seems like a century. But what does it tell us about the American voter in 2020? As you pointed out, we had this record turnout. It was a decisive win for Joe Biden, but Trump received an extraordinary 73 million votes at last count. That's 8 million more votes than Trump got in 2016.
Yeah.
What gives?
3 words: scared white people. That's what gives. What's happening now is that, the bottom line is that these presidential elections tend to function as rough pendulums, right? They tell us where the country is at any given point in time. So when Obama got elected, right, as I wrote in the Tea Party book with Matt, it scared a whole bunch of white folks, right? And that's how I was able to predict that something like this was going to happen, that is to say Trump was going to get elected. So this time we got Trump, right? So one way to think about this is and I think Obama even says this in his book, his newly published book, without him, we don't get Trump. And so now what we're having now is that these people who are Trump supporters, they see the country is changing too fast, too fast for their liking, right? They see that the America that they've come to know and love is going bye-bye, right? It's going bye-bye culturally. It's going bye-bye when, when it comes to, well, actually, most of it is culture, gender, race, and sexuality. And this country is just changing way too fast. And so what they see in Trump is they see the last thing standing between them and the rest of us. That is to say, people of color, feminists, right, and the rest of white progressives. So that's why Trump can get away what he can get away with, is because he is seen as the last thing standing between their way of life and complete and utter change. Now, the way that they think about this is that their life is that their way of life is being destroyed. The country is being destroyed, right? Because they think of politics in this very Manichaean framework. It's good versus evil. Of course, they're on the good side. The rest of us are evil.
So Chris, along those lines, though, does that explain all 73 million Trump voters and why? I mean, that's exactly the paradigm or profile you identified it back in 2016. What's going on that seems to be growing or not going away?
Well, so I think that for them, it was a counter mobilization. So one way to explain the difference in the votes that Trump got last time he's getting this time is because they saw the so-called blue wall coming, or blue wave coming rather, right? So that was a mobilization on the part of progressives. And so all the people on the right did was counter mobilize, right? Because they saw this coming. So they kind of mobilized to meet it and try to head it off. And, I mean, for someone to, let's think about this for a second, right? And maybe we're going to get to this later, but I'm just going to talk about it now. Okay, so Trump got 73 million votes and counting, which is roughly 8 million more than he got last time, right? Now, mind you guys, this is after a pandemic where on the order of 250,000 Americans are about to pass, right? Die, right? This is after locking up children. This is after him saying in Charlottesville, there are good people on both sides, suggesting, making a more equivalence, between progressives, if you will, and neo-Nazis, right? This is after saying shithole countries. This is after trying to build a wall and largely failing, right? This is, there are so many things I could, this is after, being impeached, right? The only thing that separates us from a second term from this fucking idiot, right, and where we are now is this pandemic. So it took a once in a century event to spare us from this guy, right? And so what I'm saying is that we need to really come to grips with this. Let's not be too quick to pat ourselves on our collective back saying, okay, Trump is gone. Well, A, he's not completely gone yet. B, he's going to continue to divide the country, even if he's not in the White House. And what was C? I know I had a C. A, B, and C. There are three things to everything. A, B, C is that, he actually got more votes this time, right? And so we have to come to grips. Like, people thought the 2016 election was a one-off. No, baby, that is not a one-off. This is who we are.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chris, along those lines, many people are observing Trump may have lost, but Trumpism certainly did not lose in this election, especially when you look down ballot. House races, Senate races, state legislative races. Talk about that.
Yeah, so that's another thing. And thank you for bringing that up. The expert interviewer as you are, I'm not surprised that you remember to bring something like that up. So Trump may be gone, at least from the White House, right? He's still going to haunt us for some time to come. But Trumpism is not dead. I mean, think about, I think at last count, it looks like Republicans actually picked up some seats in the House, and they may very well, if Democrats lose these runoffs, they're going to continue to have a hammerlock on the Senate. Not a hammerlock, but at least a majority on the Senate, right? So what that suggests is that there are enough people around that were not completely comfortable with Democrats in the White House. They wanted Republicans, to own, at least, well, now it's 2/3 of the government, right? If we include the court, Right. So, and if we include the federal court, I was just thinking about the Supreme Court, but the federal judiciary as well, right? So I think what that tells us is that the country is not completely convinced that, that we're not going to go, way far off to the left. And there is some tangible concern with that maybe, just maybe, Kamala will get into Joe Biden's ear and start pulling the country a little too far to the left towards socialism, right? And so what this suggests is that the country is moreover, enough people on the right are comfortable with Trump's policies, right? His judicial appointments, right? His tax cutting, right? That they're comfortable with that. And so they want a balance, right? When it comes to running the country. They don't want Democrats apparently to have a free hand.
So that raises, though, how much of a factor, when you peel it all back, Chris, is race? Certainly, many people thought, going back to Obama's election, we now have a post-racial America, and that turned out to be a completely false dream. And then Trump's election, playing the race card left and right. But where in God's name with race is this? I mean, are all 73 million race voters of his racist? Put it in context for us.
That's a really good question. So, race has been an issue, or perhaps the central issue on which this country was based and founded, right? Let's keep that 100% real, right? The parties are aligned around, have been and are and remained aligned around race. The current configuration of which happened right around, during Johnson's win in 1965, when he unapologetically aligned the Democrat Party with racial progress. And so Goldwater, 1964, and Goldwater, he took the opposite tactic with the Republican Party, right? Prior to that, it was really hard to distinguish between Republicans and Democrats, right? It was really kind of difficult. But with race and racism, this has been, this is the founding sin, right? This country was built on race and racism. Slavery built the American economy. I mean, come on, slaves built the capital, right? And then we start talking about, the use of, Chinese labor to build the railroad, coming from the West, right? This is, and then we're talking about, Latinos and the Bracero program. And, oh my God. It goes on and on. Each race-related group or racialized group has been economically exploited at one time or another, right? So this country is built on race and racism. And so therefore it does not surprise me that race and racism continues to be a problem. Now, to your question though, are all 73 million Trump supporters racist? The first time people voted for Trump, I could kind of give them a pass, right? It's like, okay, right? Maybe you just want something different. Maybe you just don't want Hillary. You just wanted something different. Now, right? Post-COVID, post-Charlottesville, post-shithole countries, post, saying racist things against the squad. It's like, how are you not going to see this guy as racist? And if you vote for a racist, yeah, I'm going to call you a racist. I'm going to call you a racist, right? It's like, no, I just like his policies, but he's racist. Yeah, I just like his policies, but he's a sexist. Yeah, I just like his policy. No, this motherfucker's a nativist, right? So how many passes do these people get, right? So at the very least, they support racism and sexism and nativism and homophobia and xenophobia if they're not that themselves. And frankly, I don't see how we can make this distinction.
Well, that is a pretty dire view of America and our divisions right now. And yet we do have a backdrop of the Black Lives Matter movement, of the blue on black violence finally being highlighted in a way that never before, with the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, a lot of white folks marching, this past summer with black folks for change. Do you see any counterpoint in America right now with race?
So okay, so I'm gonna just go out on a limb and say probably none of those people voted for Trump, right? They were out there marching for Black lives. So let me just say that, right? Do I see race relations improving, and do I see, a lot of people at the time thought what was happening in the summertime with the murder of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and the marching, a lot of white folks with Black Lives Matter. A lot of people saw that as an inflection point. I'm not convinced, right? I mean, I know I could be wrong, right? But I have to say right now, I will never go broke, betting against, white folks finding another shiny object and chasing that, right? Versus staying with race. Because if white folks were really that committed to racial progress, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now in 2020, right? There were many other times when we thought we reached an inflection point. 1960s was another time, right? We thought we reached an inflection point. Yet here we are, lo these 55, 60 years later. And then think about a couple other things that were happening during the pandemic. Now, mind you, I know this is going to sound very, very cynical on my part, but think about it like this. So there are a lot of white folks out there, and it was great. I mean, I love seeing that. However, because I know history fairly well, at least when it comes to race, I remain a little skeptical. So this is my sort of cynicism kicking in. Okay, everything was shut down in the summertime. I got to stay in the house, can't go to work, can't go to school, can't go hang out. Wait a minute, there's a protest going on. Nobody's going to sweat me from going to a protest. Nobody's going to get mad at me for doing that. Hey, Biff. Hey, Charlie. Let's go to this protest. That's my cynical side speaking, right?
It was about right. It was a get out of class pass.
Right. But what I'm saying is that this coinciding with the pandemic, it may well be an inflection point because people had time to think about these things, right? People had time to give sustained thought to racial justice. If you see somebody slowly getting murdered, right, in 9 minutes, right, that's a lot of time for you to think about a lot of stuff, right? So it's sort of one thing to see the cops shoot a black man, right? That's bad, don't get me wrong. But to see a black man's life just leave him, at the hands of another human being, but a white cop at that, that was just over the line, I think, for a lot of folks. I think that just outraged a lot of people.
Chris, that brings me to the actual 2020 vote. Biden himself is saying that it was black voters that were responsible for his victory, seeing record turnout. Put that in a little bit of context, both 2020 but historically as well.
Okay, thank you for the slides. Okay, all right. So one of the things I wanted to do here is illustrate, the extent to which black folks turned out. We took quite a beating in 2016 because, the black community, because, we didn't really turn out the way that we had turned out under Obama's both his presidential runs. And Obama wasn't on the ballot in 2016, and there are other reasons that were associated, with Hillary as a candidate that can explain that as well. So what I did was I had one of my enterprising undergraduate students, Sasha Gordon, put this together for me. And what she does is she shows a difference in the blue wall states plus Georgia between 2016 and 2018. Now, the reason why I don't have 2020 in here is because the votes haven't been validated yet. And usually the most reliable data when it comes to that comes from the current population survey. And it's going to take a little while for those to be published. But in the meantime, I have these tabulations from the current population survey from 2016 and 2018. And the reason why 2018 is important vis-a-vis 2016 is because 2016 was a presidential election year where turnout is always relatively high. 2018, of course, was a midterm election year where turnout is relatively really low. So I'm going to show you the difference in black turnout between 16 and 18 for these four states. Next slide.
Chris, can I interrupt you for 1 second? I just realized I was remiss in my opening remarks in not inviting the audience while they're listening to you to ask questions that we'll get to later from them. There's an Ask the Question tab at the bottom. So while Chris is talking, folks, please jump in with any questions. I'm sorry to interrupt, Chris.
That's okay. Can we have the next slide, please? Next slide, please. Okay, we're having.
And you can describe what that slide is. I believe.
Okay,
it's
so the next slide is, I believe, it's the state of Georgia, showing huge differences in turnout between 2016 and 2018 for Black folks. The slide after that, I believe, is the state of Michigan, which shows the same thing: huge differences in turnout from 2016 to 2018. The slide after that is Pennsylvania, same huge difference between 16 and 18. And then the final slide is the state of Georgia, which just goes off the chart, which shows that Black turnout is roughly 90% in 2018 versus what it was in 2016, which was roughly 60%. Okay, so we don't need these slides anymore.
but what do we draw? So this, talk about what that actually means and translates.
Yeah. So this is one of the things I find, deeply ironic, in that Black folks generally have to pull this country back so that it recognizes its quote unquote small d democratic ideals. It happens time after time. In the Civil War, we had Black folks serving this. I talk about this in my first book. I mean, that really made a huge difference when it came to the Civil War, right? And that's when we get the 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment. That is a function of Black military service. And then we get the aftermath of World War II and the Korean War, where you had these Black veterans come back, put their bodies on the line again, right? And help get the civil rights movement up and running. And then, so now we see, and so in these most recent elections, with Obama, and now, getting Trump out of office, but even before that, in 2018, with these midterms, where we really had a blue wave, right? And what Democrats took back or took back a lot of seats in the House, that was mainly a lot of it was due to high levels of Black turnout, like I would have shown you on these slides. And so now, turning Trump out, we see high levels of Black turnout in Georgia, that flipped Georgia, and that brought the blue wall back to the Democrat column. And so I just find it deeply ironic that the least among us, as far as race is concerned, we continually have to make America realize the small d democratic ideals. I think there is something that's just, on the one hand, that's really inspiring about that. But on the other hand, there's another part that's really fucked up about that too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just inject a personal note. My partner Lisa and I had the incredible experience of being poll watchers in Fulton County on election day. We were in an all-Black precinct, and those voters were so incredibly fired up. Their stories, their passion, their engagement, boy, did they want to vote in this election. And that 14,000 vote majority was no, accident, really. But there is something when you look at the Black vote more closely, Chris, by gender. Black women seem to be the true heroes, and Black men, I think you were quoting me, 18% of Black men voted for Trump. What's that about?
Okay, this is complete speculation right now because I don't have any hard data on that. And yeah, Black women have definitely been the true heroes. They are indeed the backbone of the party, and they should be recognized as such. Black men, I'm just speculating here. I think a big chunk of it has to do with, frankly, toxic masculinity, and I think a chunk of it also has to do with some misogyny. So that's what I think is going on. Yeah, there's some Black businessmen, who like the tax breaks, that Trump gives them, and some Black wealthy, I would imagine, would be attracted to that as well. But I just don't see how one can be a self-respecting Black man. I just don't see it. And if some people out there in the audience are going to see this, that's just too fucking bad. You want to hit me up? I'm not hard to find. We can have this discussion if you want to. I just don't see how that is possible. I don't see why that is possible. How can one vote once? I understand why, if this were a regular Republican, if a person of color wanted to vote their pocketbook, okay, I kind of get that, right? But this guy, look, Republicans should be mad at this guy, right? Because he doesn't represent their party. I mean, this guy was a Democrat before that. And beyond that, Republicans believe in law and order and integrity and discipline. Not to say that these are solely Republican traits, but this is what they're known for. This is what they run on, right? And yet you got this guy in here, right, who poo-poos the military, right, who calls them losers, right? Are you kidding me? You know, President Bone Spurs, 5 deferments for Bone Spurs, right? And he's got the nerve, the unmitigated gall to insult veterans. Please, I can't even.
So Chris, what does this increased black turnout? Looking, 3 or 4 months ago, nobody thought Georgia had a chance of turning blue. What does this tell us looking forward?
So thank you for leading me to this trough. I was just about to go on another tangent. So in some of my experimental work, some of my co-authors and I show that Black people really respond to seeing Trump as an existential threat to the community, right? I mean, the class-based frames don't work. The Bernie bro, he represents a threat to the working class, doesn't work, right? But if we frame Trump as an existential threat to the Black community, boom, right? Turnout skyrockets. And so my contention is that Black folks just saw him as an existential threat to the Black community, right? And why shouldn't they, right? Look at how this guy has behaved. He doesn't give a shit about us. He doesn't care about us. There are good people on both sides.
Yeah.
And for those Black people, I don't know where Trump gets these Black people at these rallies, right? He'll take the 4 or 5 of them that he can find, or somebody does, and puts them right behind him, right? Blacks for Trump. So he can say that he's not racist, right? Please. Okay, go ahead.
But now Trump's no longer on the ballot, and that actually raises the specter of the 2 Georgia runoffs. Will these same number of Blacks turn out in these 2 special elections in January? And it's worth pointing out Reverend Warnock, who's sort of a beloved and admired character, preacher at Martin Luther King's church, is on the ballot in the Purdue race. And Ossoff and Purdue are within a couple of points of each other. And some people argue the fact that Trump isn't on the ballot, obviously, in January, will that suppress a Trump turnout or Republican turnout? Do you have any thoughts on these special races?
I think that he doesn't have to be on the ballot in order for him to campaign for these people, right? He could campaign for them. He could really, and I use this term loosely as it pertains to him, man up, right? And go down there and campaign, for the Republican Party, right? But, it's not clear that he's going to do that for 2 reasons. One, because he doesn't care about anybody but himself, right? And 2, even if he wanted to, if either one or both of the Republicans lose, that's going to damage him down the road. So he doesn't really have any real incentive. And so it could very well work against Republicans, but it might very well work against Democrats too, since Trump is not on the ballot and he's not seen as a threat, right? So, but I think the mobilizing and organizing that Stacey Abrams, and her work and her organization has done, I think they might be able to save the day. For Warnock, I'm almost positive he'll win, right? Because think about who he's opposing. Kelly Loeffler, right? Right. And she was, caught red-handed, as was Purdue, getting inside information. When the economy was cratering, when the market was cratering. Right. And then on top of that, she got her WNBA team pissed off at her, which has mostly Black players, because she was complaining about Black Lives Matter. And so I don't think Loeffler is long for her office in DC. I think she's going to be gone, right?
I think that's a really powerful question, that's being raised. But these special elections are incredibly difficult for Democrats, and I think tough to predict. And the amount of money that's going to be spent there is going to be unimaginable. Mm-hmm. Something else in this election, and because it's something you have a lot of work with, is polls. A lot of people, again, what the heck happened with political polling in this election. Was it as off as a lot of people seem to think this time? And are political polls really useful as we move forward? Do you have any thoughts about that, Chris?
Yeah, I do. I mean, so, the jury's still out on that, frankly. There's a task force by the American Association of Public Opinion Researchers, APOR, that has been impaneled like it was last time after the 2016 election. And so, they're going to be analyzing because right now all we really have is exit polling to work with. But what I will say is that they weren't off in every state. There were some states, I think Texas, Arizona, Colorado, they were on. It was mainly in the upper Midwest. For some reason, they were off, and but there seems to be some systematic error that underestimated Trump support. And so some hypotheses around it. Oh, let me say one other thing before I finish on that. Mm-hmm. So since Democrats were predisposed because of COVID to vote by mail, mm-hmm. And to vote absentee, those votes are still coming in. And so the margins should start to narrow somewhat. In fact, they have already started narrowing somewhat as the counting has continued.
Interesting. All right.
But still there's a systematic bias in undercounting Trump support. And what some people have hypothesized is that just, so they were undersampled and so therefore underrepresented. And so then that begs a question about why they were, right? And so I think most people are settling on this idea that Trump supporters, they just by and large don't want to be polled. They don't want to cooperate with polls because they don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't trust them because it's, these big, well-funded, a lot of Democrat institutions like run these polls, right? Or left-leaning institutions, right? Run these polls, right? Because these polls are run by social scientists, right? They are governed by science. So guess what? These Trump supporters, they're not big believers in science, right? So they don't trust them.
But if they don't cooperate, does that mean political polling, it's very hard to find a methodology to correct for that? So is this going to make political polls less reliable and useful moving forward?
Well, I don't really think so. I think they just have. So this is 2 elections in a row this happened, and so I just think that what you do is you just have to. They thought they had solved this. The pollsters thought they had solved this by just adding more, weight to the Trump supporters that they did find, right? And so they just have to just weight them a little more now, right?
All right. Right. So I want to take some questions here. Audrey Levine asked Professor Parker, what concrete suggestions do you have for how we can keep issues like racial justice, reparations, criminal justice reform, and fair housing on the table and hold Biden accountable to the Black community?
Ooh, that's a really good question. You know what? The best way to do that, as Obama said, and as Lyndon Johnson said before that, protest, right? Because if you protest, you force them to address these issues, right? So I would say just continue to agitate, mobilize, and protest, right? Because what happens is the media spotlight gets thrown on these issues. Your local, state, and national representatives, they have to pay attention to it. Right. And if they don't, then you punish them come election time. Right. That's it. Right. You have to continue to push these issues. And the most effective means of doing so is through protesting. You also have to turn out the vote, though. Right. You can't just scare them and not have any consequences. Right. You have to. But protest. That is the social science has shown that is the best and most meaningful way, to keep issues on the agenda.
So Chris, this also sort of begs the question, though, once Biden is in the Oval Office, is he really going to push a true reform agenda? Or if the Republicans maintain a majority in the Senate, is he going to, much like Obama was very much a cautious centrist, but we see the same from a President Biden?
Well, I could see why Obama was more cautious than perhaps a lot of people thought he should have been, which, I don't agree in his caution. In fact, I don't agree with that, but I understand it, right? He's the first non-white man president, right? So he won a second term, and so he had to proceed with caution. And he proceeded with caution probably until probably halfway through his second term, and he was just like, okay, it seemed like he just got it at that point, right, and just did what he needed to do. So I'll say that. For Biden, this is who Biden is. Biden is a conciliator. Biden wants to reach across the aisle, right? Biden doesn't want to rock the boat, right? He's a moderate. And so then the question then becomes, so what then do Black people do, right? He said that look, we pulled his fat out of the fire in South Carolina, right? Right? I mean, come on. So he openly acknowledged that he's going to have our collective backs, right? So what do I think Biden's, okay, so he threw Black people a bone essentially by putting Kamala on the ticket, right? Now,
that's kind of cynical. You really think that's the reason he picked her?
Oh, please. Are you serious? Is this a serious question?
It's a little cynical, but
it's cynical on my part or cynical on your part?
I think a little cynical on your part. She's highly qualified.
Are you kidding me? Like what other reason would he have to put her on the ticket? It's not going to get him, like, it's not like she was from the South, so it's not going to pick him up any states in the South, right? But it probably has something to do with him winning Georgia with Black turnout, right? Right? It probably has something to do with Black turnout in all these other places. Are you fucking kidding me? You really asked me that question.
Touche, Professor. Touche.
All right. So, but anyway, to answer your question, he's in a really tough place, right? He's in a really tough place. And what do I think he's going to do? He's not going to meet us halfway, because they all make these promises and it never happens. You know, even though he's got a Black vice president, and and we put him there, right? Because so the question then becomes, if he doesn't want to run for a second term, now then he's probably got a little more leeway, right? But then the issue then becomes, how is that going to affect Kamala, right? If she runs, right? Because Republicans are going to tie her to him, right? And if he goes too far off the rails, right, then it's going to impact her, right? Yeah.
Another issue that actually President Obama raised with his new book. He's now on the media circuit, and he was on 60 Minutes Sunday. And one of the things he talked about that he said obviously impacted his presidency, but has gotten far worse, is the divisive and toxic nature of media, particularly right-wing media. Fox, Breitbart, there's talk there'll be now a Trump network, and it just fuels a kind of toxic tribalism in the body politic in America. Do you agree with that? And is there any hope to turn that around?
Oh man, yes, I certainly agree with that. And you as a media guy, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you that this is happening. But again, the media was different, when you were, doing it in DC. I mean, the landscape has really changed. I mean, so, the media used to be, back in the days where, if it was happening when I was a kid, I know it was happening when you were a kid, 3 major networks, right? Mm-hmm. And pretty much everybody got their news from those 3 major networks. And as information and therefore the media became more small d democratized, everybody started running into their respective silos, right? So you got Fox over here, you got MSNBC over here, you got CNN somewhere around, floating around the middle someplace. And so there are these echo chambers, right? And you don't hear views that are any different from yours. I mean, think about it. I mean, you will never catch me watching Fox unless it's a football game, right? I'm not watching Fox otherwise, right? I don't want to drive my blood pressure up, right? And you're not going to get somebody like Archie Bunker trying to watch MSNBC or CNN, right? And so what happens is you get these echo chambers, and I mean, basically, what do they call Fox now? State TV, Fox News, state TV, right? And so in MSNBC, you get people on the other side of the spectrum, right? And so it's increased. I mean, the empirical research has shown, in 45 ways from Sunday, right? And I said that, pun intended, that this causes polarization because you have these rival camps, and it continues to reinforce this tribalism, where now partisanship isn't so much about we agree to disagree on these political issues. Now what's called effective polarization is like, you hate me, I hate you, eat shit and die, right? Boom. There is no there is no compromise there. It used to be mainly on the right. Now it's happening on the left. You know why it's happening with increasing frequency on the left is because most progressive white folks prior to 2016, they knew there were these, right-wing Trumpish, Tea Party-ish kind of people out there. Y'all just didn't know how many there were. And I'm including you in this. You just didn't know how many there were. Trump gets elected. Oh shit. There are more than we thought there were, right? And now he gets 8 million more votes than he did last time. I mean, yeah, you guys are outraged. Progressives are outraged. And so now you see them and you hate them. They hated you first without you knowing they hated you, right? But now you hate them too.
So I agree with you about this insanely divisive media state. I guess the question, is there anything we can do? And social media is certainly a big part and parcel of all of this as well. So, so your thoughts about what we can do, or society, or government regs, anything?
Well, I think that if the pragmatist in me, the Machiavellian part of me wants to just say, look, there are more people that are progressive and that, that want to see the country do the right thing than there are of these blind Trump supporters, right? So it's just a matter of numbers, right? And people have to turn out, and turnout was really high. I think that national average for turnout was roughly 2/3. It was something like that. And, you had like Minnesota had the highest turnout, I think, of all the states, was roughly 80%, right? And you had at least 10 states that were above 70%, right? So turnout was really high. So I would just say continue to turn out and have your voices heard. And if you're really down for progressive change, then you have to hit the streets. You have to hit the streets. It's about protest and it's about mainstream politics. And so I would say just continue to turn out and just marginalize these people on the far right, and give these more establishment Republicans a chance to take their party back. Because as much as people may hate Republicans now, all of them aren't like that. You have some of them that voted with their feet and didn't vote, right? You had some that actually voted for Biden, right? And let's keep it 100%. People didn't vote for Biden as much as they voted against Trump, right? I don't know. I can't name a single person that is excited by Biden. Not a single one, right? But I know a whole lot of people that hate Trump, right? So, and it was this sense of existential threat. The thing is, what's different now, Kenan, than what we've ever had before is now the left is feeling this, or progressives are feeling this sense of existential threat, right? Fear, anger, anxiety. But that has been fueling the right for a very long time. And that's why they're able to punch above their weight so often, is because they're able to mobilize more people than the left can.
So where does that lead us to, though?
I think we're going to be divided for quite some time, because it's not like those 73 million people are going to go away anytime soon, right? It's just they're not going anyplace, and they've tasted some success. They've tasted some victory. They like being on top. Who doesn't like to be on top, right? Who doesn't want to be dominant, right? And so they've tasted a bit of that because they've had somebody in office that reflects their views. And guess what? You have these other Republicans out there. They saw how this worked for Trump. You don't think there's going to be some that try his playbook? Of course there will be. So in concert with him tweeting from the sidelines, you're going to have some Republicans that are going to try to mimic him. So we're going to be divided for quite some time because this playbook has proven divisive but effective.
And related to that, I think it's been proven most Americans, when you look at the data, are center left, yet our political and electoral system consistently gives us a center right government due to the Electoral College, gerrymandering, and the disproportionate power, of course, of small and rural states. And most of this has a history deeply rooted in racism. Do you, talk about that, and do you ever see that changing?
Very quickly. So in order to get rid of the Electoral College, it's going to require a constitutional amendment. You guys know what that requires? 38 of the states, a supermajority in the House and Senate, right? Do we ever think that's going to happen? No. Right. And I don't see states like Wyoming or Idaho or either the Dakotas, Montana, or states like those ever having enough people of color in them that would want to put pressure on their state legislatures to vote for such a thing, right? To get rid of the Electoral College. So it is going to be with us for quite some time. So, and that's just fact, right?
So I want to get back to some of the questions here. And you touched on Kamala Harris, but a question from Karen King. What do you expect from Kamala Harris in the new administration? And what is her opportunity going to be to make change?
Okay. What's up, Karen? Karen's joining us from Alaska. What's up, Karen? Need a little thing here. Wow. I mean, it's not clear what her portfolio is going to be exactly. Biden's going to have to be sort of, unless if he doesn't want a second term, he could just let her have at it. But if he wants a second term, he's gonna have to really regulate what she does so she doesn't scare off, right? A bunch of the white folks that wound up voting for Biden. And that's a problem, right? I mean, because think about it, going back to what we said early on, like what it took to beat Trump. Not only did it take all of these things, including probably most prominently a once in a century pandemic, but a milquetoast, old ass, centrist white man. I can't think of anybody else in that field, at least, the Democrat field that we just had, that would actually beat Trump. So I think if you don't have this pandemic and you don't have Biden, Trump has a second term. So I say that to say this, so that if Biden wants to keep this coalition together, right, he can't go too far left. And so therefore he can't let Kamala go too far left, even though she's the most liberal senator, right, in the Senate. He can't let her go too far left if he wants a second term. And even for her, she's going to have, if she wants to run next time, if Biden doesn't run, she's going to have to build a slightly different coalition. So I think she might be comfortable drifting a little further to the left because she knows she's not going to get these white votes, right? She's not even going to get as many white votes as Obama got. You know why? Because she's a woman. She's not going to get as many white votes as Obama got, right? So I think he has to be real careful, right? And he's got to look out for the 2022 midterms, right? So he can't, even if he didn't want a second term, he can't go crazy until then, right? Because he's going to have to get back some of these house seats, and he's going to have to try to flip the Senate.
So those who are holding out for real change, you're not offering a lot of hope from the Biden administration, it sounds like, at least
well, you know what?
a couple of years.
Well, you know what? I am not, unlike some people I know, a Pollyanna. I'm a very realist guy, right? I'm a black man in America, right? I have to be a realist, right? So I'm not surprised. And so I think there is some progress, of course. I mean, we have some symbolic progress, right? We got Kamala, that's part of the administration. So that's a good thing. Even though I think her positions are probably going to be a little muted until she runs for office and hopefully wins on her own. But Biden, like I said, he's cut out to be a centrist. And if he wants to run for a second term, or even if he doesn't want to run for a second term, if he wants to win back the House, buttress Democrat representation in the House and win back the Senate, he can't go too far off the rails. One last thing I want to say before I think we're running up on time here. No, I won't say it because it's going to require a serious explanation, and I think that's going to be too much for right now. So,
Chris, it's okay. There's something more, please.
Well, so what I wanted to say is most people in America, they are what are called symbolically conservative, if you will, but operationally more progressive. And what I'm saying with that is when it comes to their ideology, what they claim to be, no, it's actually the inverse. They are symbolically liberal or progressive, but they're operationally conservative. And symbolically liberal, what that means is that they identify themselves as more center left as a country, right? But when it comes to actual policy, they tend to be operationally more conservative in their preferences. So that's one way of explaining why we get, so many people that, like you say, center left, which is, moderate to between moderate and progressive. But when it comes to policy preferences, they are more likely to want to prefer stuff that is not as radical and that could be interpreted as relatively conservative.
Let me just jump in also, looking at some of the questions and comments. I want to acknowledge my former boss at what used to be the McNeil-Lehrer NewsHour, Jim Tringrove, who was looking back with great fondness of the days when a show like McNeil-Lehrer had both candidates, long segments, thoughtful, serious policy discussion, and how rare that is today and how much society it's a loss for all of us. Chris, there's a argument going on now in Democratic quarters between the AOC group that folks are saying the Dems lost some of the purple House seats because the Republicans successfully used AOC painting a crazy radical socialist picture of these centrist Democrats, and AOC countered that these folks just didn't run good elections, didn't know how to use social media and so on. Do you have any thoughts about this fight, which is going to continue within the Democratic Party?
As long as, I think the word socialism in an American context, it just scares a lot of people because they conflate it with, the Soviet Union and the Cold War and totalitarianism, right? And people just don't understand what socialism really is, especially democratic, small d socialism. So just socialism, it's like Pavlovian for them. People that were around, had come of age during and after the Cold War for many people. And I think that as long as that label is continuously deployed, or it can be available for deployment by the right, it's going to be a problem. Because like you said, this country is essentially, at least ideologically, operationally rather, like closer to the center right than it is the center left. And that just gives people heartburn, about this whole thing about socialism. And so I think that even though most people would be better off under, universal health care, and more progressive or liberal social safety net, so when you hit them with the policies themselves, they like the policies. But when we do these experiments and you frame it as socialist, right, support plummets. And so I think the progressives in the Democratic Party, they need to, I would suggest, if they want to be more pragmatic and less idealistic about it, start to rebrand that stuff, start to move away from the socialist label and come up with another buzzword, if you will, because that's going to continue to be a problem.
I think that's a really keen insight, the same way defunding the police became a moniker that was sort of turned inside out. And, even the fact that the right's been very successful making liberalism such a dirty word that now you're just a progressive, and that leads me actually to a conversation, Chris, as we're wrapping up, about what it means to be a patriot in America. And I'll just say a little personal note here. I'm actually wearing a flag on my lapel pin here because I deeply resent the fact that the right has stolen the flag from us. So I think all of us, liberals and progressives, should proudly wear flags. But you have some, I think, really thoughtful insights about, if you consider yourself an American and a patriot, what that actually demands of people.
Yeah, thank you. So patriotism is at bottom a commitment to a set of values and traditions so deep that one is willing to sacrifice up to and including one's life, if necessary, through military service. But in America, those values tend to be fairly progressive. Equality or egalitarianism, and tolerance are among, the two keystone American political values. They're cornerstones of American political culture. Some people would say freedom, and I guess I could say that too, but that can be kind of a sticky wicket. And I say that because freedom or liberty is complicated in the following way. In more classical liberalism and I don't mean as we understand it today, I'm talking about liberalism as a political philosophy. It's about freedom and liberty from big government. Now, and that's a good thing in abstract, but what it does is that freedom also allows people and even encourages the accumulation of private property to the extent that it can really warp politics and society. So that kind of freedom taken to its limits, taken to its natural limits, can lead to the accumulation of slaves, right? And that's just one way, right? So one man's freedom is another man's bondage in that sense, but it doesn't even need to go all the way to slavery. You got these rich folks like the Koch brothers who are gobbling up everything. Just think about this unlimited accumulation of property and how they're able to warp politics, right? And bend society to their will. So, and I'll say this one other thing. Freedom also has other kind of racialized connotations as well, in that white people tend to think about freedom as freedom from the government. People of color tend to think about freedom as freedom from discrimination. So freedom is complicated. So what I will say, if it's about a commitment to equality and tolerance, then that suggests that if one is considered an American, one should be willing to fight and die to one's last breath, so that somebody that doesn't look like them can enjoy the same rights and privileges that they do. So when people say, speaking out against government is not patriotic, that's bullshit. These people either don't know history or they don't want to know it, because this country was founded on dissent, right? It's founded on dissent. And so dissent is the lifeblood of this country. And so for people to say America, love it or leave it, right? It's like, no, dog, no, right? No. As far as Black people are concerned, it is no way. I would never become an expatriate, because too many of my people spilled their blood in order for me to have the opportunities that I have. Right? And and Frederick Douglass I can go down the line and discuss critical patriots. And Frederick Douglass loved this country, but he was also critical of it, because there was this gap between principles and lived social practices. And American patriotism is about bringing these two things into alignment.
So, Chris, I think along those lines, you also talked, though, that patriotism is about sacrifice. And you and I were talking earlier how Stacey Abrams, after she lost the governor's race, actually had it stolen from her, could have just taken her marbles and gone home. Instead, she was all in, creating fair fight, and has become a transformative activist as an example. And so talk a little bit about, if you really care about this country, being an American isn't easy. It's work and it's sacrifice, and what you mean by that.
No, being American, yes, it's a lot of hard work. If we think about the civil rights movement, the women's movement, the suffragettes, along with that, and the labor movement, those people put their bodies on the line, for other people, not only for themselves, but for other people. So, I mean, those people were patriots. If one is willing to sacrifice one's body, and even one's own time, because every right has a correlative duty. A right to a free and fair trial means that you have to be willing to serve on jury duty. Every right has a correlative duty. People don't recognize that. In America, we're always hollering about rights. Well, we have this right, and you got to be willing to perform this duty. And for so long, Black folks and other marginalized groups, women, other people of color, have been performing these duties without benefiting from the correlative right. And patriotism is really mainly about duties and not even really thinking about the rights. So yeah, being an American is a lot of hard work. And for a white man to be patriotic, you guys got to give up a lot. But if you really love this country, like many of you say you do, then there's a lot more work you guys have to do.
I don't argue, and I would point actually that folks who had said, well, if Trump's reelected, I'm out of here. I'm leaving this country, and that is the ultimate white privilege. Those who actually can afford to just get up and move, and then leave the mess for folks who, you know.
That's right.
So as we're ending tonight, I guess a fitting question, Chris, where does America go from here? Or are you in 2020, 2 weeks after the strange election, optimistic about America's future post-Trump?
This is what I think. I said this, when he got elected in 2016, and I've written about this as well, that I think Trump being elected actually may be a good thing for America because it brings all of this division to the surface. People can't hide from it anymore. You can't gaslight women anymore, asking them, hey, are you sure that's about sexism, right? I mean, you can gaslight them, but you come across as an asshole, right? Because you see who's in the White House. How can you say that this isn't sexism, right? Or racism or homophobia? All these divisions have come to the surface, y'all. And now it's about dealing with them. So I think we've reached an inflection point. And now that we've reached an inflection point, things can get markedly better because all of the warts have been revealed. Now we have to excise them, if you will. And what we're doing right now is the work of excising these warts. And I think eventually we'll get there. It's not going to happen for another 10 years or so. It's going to be quite some time before this gets straightened out. But in the long run, my granddaughter will live in a much better society than I live in now.
Well, that is a good note to end on. But before we do say goodnight, Chris, a little note of personal privilege I want to share with all of our friends here tonight. That when I was taking one of Chris's graduate classes last winter, it was February pre-COVID, and I was going off in class about how I thought there was no way Trump would be reelected, and Chris wisely pushed back on me, explaining that no, Trump was going to be the next president, and that led to a $100 bet. At which point, one of my graduate classmates turns to me and says, "Kenan, that's the single stupidest bet I've ever seen anyone make, because you realize if Trump wins, not only are you going to be really depressed, you're going to be out $100. So I'm only sorry, Chris, we are not together in person, so I can actually collect my bet."
Oh, I'll pay you back, but I want you to be mindful of the fact that it took a pandemic and an old centrist white man for him not to get reelected. Okay, so I'll give you your money, but bear that in mind.
Yeah, I think this election actually proves that your call back in February was smart. Anyway, I want to thank everyone at Town Hall, and most of all of you from around the country for joining us tonight. This has really been great, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, and on behalf of Town Hall, I want to thank you both for presenting with us tonight virtually. Thank you so much for making that quick switch. And Dr. Parker, thank you so much for your scholarship, and your expertise is so valuable in this moment. Such an energizing event. It's so easy, I think, for all of us to just sit back and watch the house burn down. But
Candace, before we do, I'm sorry, but one thing I intended before throwing it to you to say goodnight was I want to put up on the screen Professor Parker's personal website.
Yeah.
It's ChristopherSebastianParker.com. Again, ChristopherSebastianParker.com. And it's a terrific resource for a lot of Chris's academic work, his media work. So any of you who just want to learn a lot more, please check out ChristopherSebastianParker.com. So back to my friends at Town Hall. Candace, thank you again for all of your great work.
Yeah, thank you. I just threw that in the chat. It's also at that button right in the bottom center of the screen as well. So check that out. Thank you both so much again. And thank you to everyone who's watching tonight. If you want to follow more Town Hall events, you can follow this Crowdcast channel and check out our website as well.
And can I remind, I'm sorry, the brain goes.
Go ahead.
All of you who were not able to attend or want to share this, Town Hall records these sessions. So if you go to Town Hall's website for the next 5 days, you can pay $5 to view this. And then after that, it's available free on YouTube. So this conversation will live in perpetuity.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
both again so much. We'll see you again next time in person, hopefully.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.